Chapter 1. Shen Qianxi's plane had taken off. The atmosphere in the hotel lounge was heavy, and I smoked, my face expressionless. Perhaps only the slight tremor in my hand betrayed the turmoil within. My parents also wore grim expressions as they looked at Shen Qianxi's parents. Uncle Shun had already smashed over a dozen cups. The people he sent were still too late. They hadn't brought her back. There were 2 messages on my phone that I hadn't shown them. One was from Shen Qianxi. Bai, it's an emergency. I can't explain. I'll be back. I'll make up the wedding. The other was a video of Shen Qianxi on the phone. She was still wearing her wedding reception dress, the one she had custom designed over a year ago. The bracelet on her wrist was the Lu family's gift to their daughters-in-law, a symbol of the Lu family matriarch. Her voice was filled with tenderness and surprise, the joy of recovering something lost, palpable even through the screen. I'd watched that video more than 10 times, frame by frame. It hurt. After all, she was the girl I'd loved since childhood. It's a pity she had a chance to turn back, but she made the wrong choice. Having made her bed, she now has to lie in it. I smiled, stubbed out my cigarette, and stood before our parents. The auspicious time has arrived. Let the wedding proceed. Chapter 2. 5 days and 5 nights passed before Shen Qianxi reappeared. For 120 hours, the Lu and Shen families had been at the center of a media storm. No matter how much they tried, the trending topics wouldn't die down. People were saying all sorts of things. I was ridiculed for completing the wedding ceremony alone, being labeled a ninja turtle, and even having my face turned into a green meme. The Shen family had indeed wronged me. To express their apology, Uncle Shun hosted a banquet. Today was also the day Shen Qianxi was supposed to return, but she was nowhere to be seen even after the banquet started. Uncle Shun's face was grim, but he forced a smile as he urged everyone to drink. Bai, you've been wronged in this matter. Dad will toast you. Thanks to you for handling this, but it's unfair to you. Don't worry. Dad will give you a satisfactory explanation. I smiled and nodded, drinking the wine. Just as I set down my glass, the door to the private room opened, and a weary-looking Shen Qianxi walked in. The room fell silent. Her parents glared at her, while mine seemed to have mentally checked out. Unable to contain his anger, her father slapped her and then dragged her to my side. Apologize. Shen Qianxi gave a forced smile, one that looked very insincere. Dad, Mama, Bai, I'm sorry. This was my fault. Though there were reasons, it was ultimately my mistake. Not receiving the expected response, Shen Qianxi remained unfazed. She pulled a document from her bag. I know my actions were impulsive, but I promise there won't be a next time. Also, I secured the European supplier contract for the Lu Corporation. Consider my apology gift. Chapter 3. The European supplier's identity was a crucial step for the Lu Corporation's expansion into overseas markets. We've been working on it for a long time, but we just couldn't clinch the deal. There were no problems with any of the steps, yet the contract remained unsigned. No matter how hard we tried, we couldn't find the issue. I had to admit, Shen Qianxi had judged the situation perfectly. This contract would definitely earn her forgiveness. Watching my parents, their expressions changed repeatedly as they looked at the contract. The contract was important, but the Lu Corporation's reputation was also crucial. Just like always, Shen Qianxi smiled, picked up her wine glass, and toasted my parents. Seeing that my parents didn't refuse, her father laughed heartily, trying to smooth things over. Brother Lu, don't be angry anymore. My daughter still cares about Bai, and this contract is also for the benefit of the Lu Corporation, isn't it? Since it's hard to refuse someone with a smiling face, everyone used this opportunity to save face and raise their glasses to celebrate the contract. The awkwardness of the wedding was tactfully left unmentioned. However, Shen Qianxi, you think you could just get away with giving me such a big gift? I chuckled softly, invited her to the seat beside me, and even thoughtfully adjusted her clothes. Qianxi, have you been tired these past few days? Is Xiaoya's health better? How have you been living abroad all these years? It must have been tough on you having to sign a contract and take care of Xiaoya in such a short period of time. Don't worry, I'll send someone abroad to take good care of Guyi. As soon as I finished my caring words, Shen Qianxi's smile froze on her face. The slightly improved atmosphere immediately returned to its previous state. I ignored it, pretending not to notice. Bai, no need. Guyi is fully recovered and we've been doing well these years. You don't need to bother. I'm a little tired. I'll go back and rest. Can we reschedule the wedding sometime later? I know I've made things difficult for you these past few days. After she finished speaking, she prepared to get up and leave. Before she reached the door, the sound of a glass smashing on the floor rang out. It was her father, his hand trembling with anger. Stop! If you dare to take another step, I'll break your legs today. Now, Shun Qianxi had no choice but to sit back down at the table. The atmosphere throughout the meal was indescribably strange. Shun Qianxi was on pins and needles, trying to take out her phone several times, but I stopped her each time. After this tasteless meal was finally over, both families left the hotel together. Chapter 4. After lunch, we pretended as if nothing had happened. Naturally, it was just a facade. But this superficial piece was completely shattered by the figure at the car door. Guyi, standing at the car door smoking, seemed to be waiting for Shun Qianxi. The moment she saw him, Shun Qianxi panicked, but quickly regained her composure. Ai, why did you come down? Didn't I tell you to wait in the car? It must be said, Guyi, in a white suit, was very handsome, possessing the capital worthy of Shun Qianxi's affections. Everyone was watching this farce. No one spoke. Under everyone's gaze, Shun Qianxi gently took Gu Ye's hand, completely disregarding the face of both families' elders, let alone the face of me, her new husband. I put my hands in my pockets, with no intention of stopping them. For someone who doesn't love you, everything you do is superfluous. Better to save your energy and breath. Uncle, Annie, I've returned from abroad. It's been many years. I wonder how you both are? Don't blame Qianxi for this matter. It's my own choice. If you two don't want to see me, I can leave again. As soon as he finished speaking, Shun Qianxi reacted, frowning and shielding Guyi behind her. Shun Qianxi's father trembled with anger and went to hit him, but was stopped by her mother. Qianxi, what do you mean by bringing him back? I'll give you a chance. Send him away today, and he's not allowed to return to the country in the future. Shun Qianxi's attitude changed completely, becoming incredibly unfamiliar to us all. She looked at everyone so coldly, her words subverting everyone's understanding of the situation. Dad, Mom, my biggest regret was letting you send Ai abroad, separating us for 5 whole years. But now I'm in charge of Shun Group, and only I can decide whether he stays or goes. I've already married Lu Bai according to your wishes. I'll handle the rest myself. You two should just focus on enjoying your retirement. Her father's face was livid, but he was helpless. Shun Qianxi then looked at our family. Dad, I've secured the contract with Lu Group's European supplier for you, and I've brought it to you immediately. This is my sincerity and goodwill. You should know how to handle certain things. Finally, she looked at me disdainfully, her eyes full of mockery. Bai, I married you, but you will be my assistant. We won't divorce. I will fulfill my role as Mrs. Lu. You should know very well that I've always loved Ai. In the future, we'll be respectful to each other. I don't mind how you play, as long as you don't go too far. As for children, we'll do a paternity test after they're born. If they're yours, they'll take your surname and be the heir to Lu Group. If not, they'll take my surname and be the heir to Shun Group. After speaking, she pulled Guyi into the car without looking back. Just before getting in, Guyi shot me a provocative, triumphant smile. Chapter 5. Under everyone's gaze, I maintained my usual calm demeanor and handled all matters appropriately. Shun Qianxi and I were childhood sweethearts, innocent and carefree. When she was little, she was my shadow, always crying and clinging to me. But I never found her annoying. Our families had joked about us getting married since we were young. As a result, the cooperation between our families became increasingly close. It could be said that neither family could do without the other. Therefore, it was common knowledge within the Jiangxing circles, not just between our parents, that I would marry Shun Qianxi. The only unexpected event was that Shun Qianxi and I didn't attend the same university, and Guyi was her senior there. Shun Qianxi is very beautiful, the kind of presence one can't forget at first glance. It's normal for her to be admired. During their sophomore year, they got together. The specifics are unclear. The Shun family kept it a secret. Only Shen Qianxi's father acted swiftly, directly nipping the relationship in the bud. Disregarding Shun Qianxi's objections, he sent Guyi abroad and cut off all contact between them. From then on, Shen Qianxi became much quieter, and her smiles seemed forced. I knew all of this. We both grew up and soon took over our respective family businesses. During our engagement, I had a serious talk with Shen Qianxi because Guyi was a thorn in both her heart and mine. Qianxi, if you can't let go of Guyi, I'll let you go. There's no need to force yourself. I still remember how determined her gaze was, how focused her eyes were when she looked at me. Bai, Guyi and I are over. You don't have to dwell on it. I was immature back then and caused you to worry. The marriage between the Lu and Shen families was decided long ago. Rest assured, I will be Mrs. Lu. We are inseparable. At that moment, I admit I was a little touched. The distance that had grown between us over the years seemed to lessen. But in a flash, it all turned to bullshit. Chapter 6. Since I was young, I've been quiet. Even facing such a huge issue, facing such insulting words, I just coldly arranged everything. My parents looked at Shun Qianxi's parents coldly. They didn't get angry, but it was worse than anger. A perfectly good apology dinner ended up losing face for the Lu family again. I guess Shun Qianxi's parents must want to kill someone. I didn't see Shun Qianxi for the next few days. She didn't return to our marital home either. It's normal. Lovers reunited. How could a few days be enough? Our circle is small. News travels fast. I didn't need to pry. The news naturally reached my ears. Shun Qianxi and Gu Yi moved into the villa she bought. They were quite high profile. It seems Shun Qianxi wants to completely crush the Lu family's face into the ground. Perhaps in her eyes, our marriage was a disgrace. It's fine. I don't want her anymore. As for who will have the last laugh, we'll just have to see. Shun Qianxi went too far. Even my assistant couldn't stand it. Mr. Lu, are you just going to let this go? You're the laughingstock of the circle now. A laughingstock? Inevitably. I closed my eyes and leaned back in my office chair. I've been too tired lately. Looking at my assistant's worried expression, I smiled. You need to focus on the European suppliers. We paid a high price. We can't lose them. As for Shun Qianxi, let her do whatever she wants. My assistant was incredulous. I'm usually quiet, but I've always cared about face. Mr. Lu, madam is going too far now. You can't continue like this. This will inevitably affect the cooperation between Lu Corporation and Shun Corporation. I gently waved my hand, signaling him not to worry. Shun Qianxi's parents aren't worried. Why should I be? I believe Gu Yi will come looking for me soon. As for the cooperation between our companies, Shun Qianxi doesn't have the final say. Chapter 7. As I expected, Gu Yi couldn't keep his composure. Of course, given a hard-won opportunity to climb the social ladder, how could he possibly give it up? In the cafe, I watched him with amusement, my face betraying no anger. Gu Yi's expression was arrogant. It seemed Shun Qianxi had really spoiled him. Mr. Gu looks well. You and Qianxi must be inseparable these days. He laughed mockingly and extended his wrist, revealing a watch. Mr. Lu, do you recognize this watch? A year ago, Qianxi had this watch custom-made. It was intended for the one she loved. Don't I look good wearing it? You're a joke. You're only stopping us from being together because you grew up with Qianxi and you have the Lu Corporation's wealth backing you up. Haven't you heard that childhood sweethearts can't compete with destiny? You're truly pathetic. It's been half a month since your wedding, and your wife has been in my bed the whole time. Seeing his smug look, I actually laughed. I was genuinely amused. This man's green tea act was quite something, making this whole drama worthwhile. Mr. Gu, you're having a nice dream. I hope you don't wake up. However, don't you think this reunion is a bit too coincidental? After I said that, his face paled. Now he probably remembered. 4 or 5 years, they tried countless ways to contact each other, but they only succeeded when they shouldn't have. He probably also remembered why everything after his return to the country went so smoothly. With the power of the Lu and Shun families, things wouldn't have been that easy. Yet, it was as if fate had arranged everything. After a long while, Guyi looked at me, his face drained of color. "It was you? Why?" I knew he was panicking. In the face of overwhelming capital, he was nothing. His only reliance was Shun Qianxi's favor. I took a sip of coffee. It wasn't bad. My gaze was too calm, so calm that it unnerved him. Just as he was about to leave, I spoke unhurriedly. "Mr. Gu, legally speaking, I am Shun Qianxi's husband. You are merely the third party. I've been with Shun Qianxi for over 20 years. How could I easily hand her over to someone insignificant like you? You were merely a tool I used to verify certain things." Guye's composure was truly lacking. He got angry after just a few words. How uninteresting. I handed him the tablet, gesturing for him to read it before getting angry. Soon, his face darkened considerably. "You investigated me?" I laughed. "What a fool. Mr. Gu, Shun Qianxi's husband will only ever be me." Chapter 8. For a while after that, Shun Qianxi still didn't come home, and I didn't care. I ran into Shun Qianxi and Guyi again at Song Shiqiao's welcome home party. I arrived late. Just as I entered, I saw Song Shiqiao throw a glass of wine in Guye's face. Guye's face, usually handsome, was a mixture of anger and embarrassment. Being humiliated in front of so many people was a first for him since returning to the country. Song Shiqiao was clearly furious. After splashing the wine, he went up and slapped Guyi a few times. This guy was never one to be trifled with. He had a fiery temper and was a bully in our circle. Even after hitting him, Song Shiqiao still wasn't satisfied. But before he could do anything else, Shun Qianxi, her face full of rage, stepped in front of Guyi. "Song Shiqiao, enough!" Song Shiqiao stopped, looking at Shun Qianxi sarcastically, his words equally unkind. "Shun Qianxi, you're something else. I rushed back to celebrate after hearing you and Bai got married. Is this how you treat people? You haven't appreciated any of Bai's kindness, have you? Messing around with this lowlife and even skipping your own wedding. You're truly despicable." I understood. He was venting for me. Song Shiqiao and I had always been close brothers since childhood. I did send him an invitation to the wedding. He couldn't make it back because he had something to deal with at the time. Later, when we talked on the phone, I felt too awkward to mention Shun Qianxi's absence. Shun Qianxi had no way to refute this. No matter what, that incident was her fault. Guyi, however, was rather ungrateful, probably emboldened by Shun Qianxi's favoritism. "Who do you think you are? You have no right to interfere in Qianxi's affairs. Qianxi and I are truly in love. If it weren't for Lu Bai's interference, we would have been married long ago." Guyi looked at Shun Qianxi, his eyes filled with what seemed like passionate love. Anyone other than love-struck Shun Qianxi could see that it was mostly an act. "Qianxi, I'm sorry. I've embarrassed you. Don't worry. I'll work hard. I'll definitely make something of myself and stand by your side with dignity." Seeing her wild man so ambitious, Shun Qianxi was practically moved to tears, completely ignoring me as I walked up to them. She threw herself into Guye's arms. "Ayi, don't worry. I'll definitely help you." What a touching pair of lovebirds, completely disregarding their respective situations, embracing each other right there. "Qianxi, I'll start a company tomorrow. I have some savings from these years, and I know quite a few people. I'll definitely succeed. You'll support me, right?" A passionate French kiss answered the question. Shun Qianxi was truly brainwashed. With Guye's character, if he had any savings, it would be a measly sum. He lived like a pauper abroad. How could he have saved any money? As for connections, that was even more absurd. He simply wanted Shun Qianxi to invest in him. Watching this farce, I laughed, with no intention of interfering. People always have to pay the price for their choices. The once formidable Shun Qianxi in the business world ultimately failed to overcome the trials of love and was not far from being pulled down from her pedestal. Chapter 9. Gradually, Shun Qianxi became a laughingstock in our circle. Naturally, as her husband in name only, I was too. Since Guyi returned to the country, Shun Qianxi hasn't come home once. Guyi is always by her side. I welcome this, of course. I don't like picking up scraps. Now everyone in the circle has started a betting pool on when we'll divorce. Keeping a mistress is common in our circle, but no one has made such a mess of it. Shen Qianxi is a pioneer in this regard. I saw Shen Qianxi again at the signing ceremony for a major deal the Lu and Shun families had jointly secured with the Zhao family of the Northwest. It was a grand affair, and attendance was mandatory. Now that the elders of both families have retired, Shen Qianxi and I, as the company's actual controllers, couldn't delegate our attendance. Otherwise, the cooperation with the Zhao family would be jeopardized. This deal was a project both families had been planning for years. When I arrived, I raised an eyebrow. Shen Qianxi was only accompanied by her assistant. How strange. Why isn't CEO Gu accompanying CEO Shen today? How surprising. A flicker of guilt flashed in Shen Qianxi's eyes at my sarcasm. After all, I'd shouldered the humiliation willingly for so long. She knew that. Aye's company is just taking off. He has business to discuss today. The woman who had humiliated me countless times now, just a few months later, had a hint of a pleading expression on her face. Today marks a milestone in the development of Lu Corp and Shin Corp. I think my husband should be by my side. I didn't take the bait. I dodged her outstretched hand, stepping back to maintain what I considered to be more than an arm's length. CEO Shun, this is business. It would be better if you addressed me as CEO Lu. As for the term husband, you don't seem to care much about it yourself. Shen Qianxi's smile froze. She hesitated, then finally said, I'll buy about that matter. Before she could finish, someone from the Zhao family interrupted. The signing ceremony was about to begin. Ignoring the emotion in Shen Qianxi's eyes, I got up and walked into the venue. I didn't want to hear a single word she had to say. What? After slapping me in the face, repeatedly, she thought a few soft words would make everything disappear. Who did she think she was? And who did she think I was? As the signing ceremony began, we exchanged pleasantries with the Zhao family representatives. All smiles. Shen Qianxi's phone vibrated. She hesitated, then hung up. Chapter 10. The signing ceremony was short, only half an hour. During that time, Shen Qianxi's phone rang at least 20 times. I watched her with amusement. The name flashing on her screen was Gu Yi. CEO Shen and CEO Gu are truly a devoted couple, inseparable even for a moment. It's enviable. Shen Qianxi's eyes darkened slightly, but she didn't say anything. The contract was signed, and the Zhao family approached. As partners, I had to show them utmost respect. I stood up, and Shen Qianxi hurriedly rose as well, trying to take my arm, but she stumbled. Wearing high heels, she almost fell. I helped her steady herself. After all, a fall would embarrass both families. Thank you, she said. I replied indifferently. You're welcome, Ms. Shun. She froze, surprised by my formal address, leaving her no face. My conversation with the Zhao family was pleasant. We had just agreed on an evening celebration when a staff member entered with a grim expression. Before I could understand what was happening, the Zhao family's faces darkened. The Northwest Zhao family's roots were in officialdom, and they valued their reputation. This collaboration was possible because the Lu and Shen families had always had good reputations. CEO Lu, CEO Shun, there's a small matter that might require your attention. Otherwise, it could affect our cooperation. They then had someone turn on a large screen and connect a video call. Gu Ye's figure appeared on the screen, surrounded by many people. Qianxi, help me. I've been framed, he cried. They've taken the company's money and falsely accused me of illegal fundraising. Now there are creditors everywhere. If this continues, I'll have to jump off a building. Shen Qianxi frowned at the screen, grabbed a microphone, and gently consoled him. Hey, don't get excited. No matter what, we'll solve it. Go home first. I'll have someone from Shun Group handle it. Gu Yi wouldn't listen, especially seeing me standing next to Shen Qianxi. He became even more frantic. His eyes were bloodshot as he glared at me. Qianxi, have you changed your heart? Why are you with Lu Bai? You know my company is in trouble, yet you use the signing as an excuse to see Lu Bai. What do you mean? Yes, he's your legal husband. Are you going back to him? Then why did you come to me? Do you want me to die? Shun Qianxi's face was filled with exhaustion, but she still forced a smile to comfort him. Hey, don't get excited. Today's signing is a joint order won by the Lu and Shun families. I'll resolve your issue. Go home now, and I'll talk to you later, okay? Guyi wasn't buying it and continued to yell. I don't believe you. Divorce him and marry me, or I won't believe you. Everyone present was dumbfounded. The Zhao family, the Lu family, and the Shun family. No one looked pleased. Shun Qianxi finally realized how embarrassing this was and gave Guyi a final warning. Guyi, stop this nonsense, or you can go back abroad. Shun Qianxi's demeanor seemed to snap Guyi's fragile nerves, and he completely lost control. He grabbed a nearby hammer and charged towards the people he had allegedly defrauded. By the time the police controlled the scene, we had arrived. There were injured people everywhere, their moans echoing. I frowned, watching the busy paramedics. This scene would severely impact Lu Corp and Shun Group's stock prices. Before I could get angry, I saw Shun Qianxi anxiously run to a corner. That bastard Guyi was kneeling there, feigning weakness and crying hysterically. Qianxi, I was wrong. I just love you too much. I can't stand seeing you with Lu Bai. Look at me. Even if I die now, I'm willing. You know how much I love you. Shun Qianxi's anxious expression left me speechless. What a perfect match. Even at this moment, her focus was solely on the man and their drama. Love truly makes people blind. I was grateful that Shun Qianxi wasn't in love with me. Cleaning up this mess would be a nightmare. Still, I sighed and called out to Shun Qianxi. Shun Qianxi, with such a big incident, you'd better be rational. Guyi's company is a subsidiary of Shun Group. If you don't handle this scene now, it will greatly impact Shun Group's stock price. I advise you to be sensible. My interruption seemed to provoke Guyi again. He instantly resumed his dramatic act. Qianxi, I've embarrassed you. Go ahead with your business. I'll atone with my death and definitely not tarnish Shun Group's reputation. He pulled a fruit knife from his pocket and stabbed it towards his heart. Shun Qianxi's eyes were filled with pain as she instinctively ran towards him. My face was full of mockery. A fruit knife? And through such thick clothing? How ridiculous! But Shun Qianxi didn't think so. As she ran, she shouted at me, "Hey, Bai, I'll leave this to you. I'm sorry for this. I'll repay you later for what I owe you." I watched her running figure without a word. Shun Qianxi, this is the consequence of your repeated wrong choices. The show goes on, but the lead role has changed. Shun Qianxi's father called me over the next day. At the ward's entrance, I saw Shun Qianxi. It had only been a month, but her father had aged considerably. His hair was completely white. When he saw Shun Qianxi, he looked away. I noticed the disappointment in his eyes. Shun Qianxi's mother also had a gloomy expression and completely ignored Shun Qianxi, instead grabbing my hand and crying continuously. I hurriedly comforted her, not sparing Shun Qianxi a single glance. She had to clean up her own mess. Before Shun Qianxi could find a way to beg her parents' forgiveness, her phone rang. After hesitating for a long time, she answered it. "Hello, this is Jiangqing Detention Center. Are you a family member of Guyi?" After Guyi was arrested, he became emotionally unstable and attempted suicide 3 times last night. He now requests to see you. I didn't hear the rest because Shun Qianxi had already walked out. The 3 of us remained silent. Anything we said now would be useless. She wouldn't listen. Standing to the side, I quietly accompanied them. Frankly, this was no longer just my family matter. What mattered more now was the Su family's attitude. They were the ones who raised their daughter. Seeing me say nothing, my in-laws awkwardly didn't know what to say either. Just as everyone was wondering how to break the silence, Shun Qianxi's father's assistant, an employee of the Shun Corporation, rushed in, panicked. "Chairman, the Zhao family from northwest China called to question us." I frowned and stopped preparing to leave. The assistant ignored me, standing beside Shun Qianxi's father with a very troubled expression. Shun Qianxi's father seemed to have anticipated this and remained calm. "Don't panic. Tell me what's happening." The assistant looked distressed and after a long while cautiously said, "The Zhao family said that this incident has had a very negative impact, especially since this collaboration involves government projects. They said we must immediately replace the CEO of Shun Corporation and issue a public statement to mitigate the impact of the incident. Otherwise, they will withdraw from the collaboration. As soon as he finished speaking, Shun Qianxi's mother panicked. The Lu and Shen families had invested so much in this collaboration. If the Shun family withdrew now, it would be no different than handing over a dowry to the Lu family. Although the two families were in-laws, Shun Qianxi's recklessness had created an ever-widening rift between them. They were just putting up a front. Shun Qianxi's father closed his eyes and gestured for me to leave. Chapter 13. The nurse told me that as soon as I left, Shun Qianxi's father vomited blood. Already consumed by rage, he became paralyzed and bedridden. According to the hospital, he'll likely spend the rest of his life in bed. Shun Qianxi rushed back from the detention center after being notified, but her father, as the company's major shareholder, had already issued his final order, appointing me as the CEO of Shun Group. She had completely lost control. Shun Qianxi stood outside her father's ward for days, pleading with him, but he refused to see her. A week later, at night, I received her call. I didn't go home that night, just spent it in the company lounge. It wasn't the first time. This had been going on for a long time, but Shun Qianxi had never shown any concern. No, to be precise, she never knew, her mind solely occupied by Guyi. My phone buzzed. I stared at it for a while before answering. Shun Qianxi, what is it? Silence on the other end, only the sound of breathing indicating someone was listening. Shun Qianxi. Shun Qianxi sounded drunk, crying, but with a hint of remorse. Hey, Bai, I got the watch back. Will you still accept it? I know I was wrong. Will you forgive me? I thought for a moment, deciding not to provoke her. After considering my words, I slowly replied, Shun Qianxi, I don't like secondhand things. You've always known that. It's just a watch. I don't want it. Silence again, then a self-deprecating laugh. After a long pause, she said faintly, secondhand? Including me? I couldn't answer that question, even though in my heart the answer was yes. After hesitating, I simply murmured, Perhaps my answer didn't satisfy her, or perhaps it touched a raw nerve. She cried for a while, then laughed a miserable laugh. Bai, I was wrong. I was really wrong. Guyi is a bastard. He's been married all along, just hiding it from me. I wondered why he always avoided talking about things abroad. I thought it was because that time had left him with painful memories, so I never asked. Yesterday, I found out he's being kept by a rich woman. He's even married to a 50-something-year-old rich woman. She sobbed heartbrokenly. I was annoyed, but I had to patiently listen. Bai, I regret it. For such a scumbag. I resented my parents for 5 whole years and deceived you. I deliberately hurt you, made you a laughingstock, completely shattered you. I know you loved me. Now, I only have you left. Please forgive me. I really can't lose you again. I just listened, saying nothing. The cold moonlight shone through the window, reminding me of that year. Guyi was sent abroad by Shun Qianxi's father. Shun Qianxi started hating me, believing I was somehow responsible. I felt wrong, but mostly heartbroken. Back then, she often went out drinking, disappearing without a trace. Worried about her, I contacted every one of her friends, searching for her countless nights, bringing her home. I remember that night, the moonlight as cold as tonight. I stood outside the private room, listening to her conversation with her friends. Qianxi, no matter what, Lu Bai likes you. Look at him, searching everywhere for you, afraid something happened to you. Our families are destined for arranged marriages. Don't be too willful. If you really don't like Lu Bai, it's better to make it clear, so you don't waste each other's time. I felt helpless. It seemed Shun Qianxi truly hated me. At that moment, I felt cold. Before I could leave, Shun Qianxi's voice rang out. If it weren't for the arranged marriage between our families, Guyi wouldn't have been sent abroad. I won't let Lu Bai off easy. He's the one who ruined my love. He wants to marry me? Fine, I'll marry him. I'll completely swallow Lu Corp, then send him abroad too, to live all alone. By the time I snapped back to reality, Shun Qianxi had hung up. I chuckled softly. Shun Qianxi, when you were just a step away from happiness, your willfulness destroyed it all. Now you regret it? I'm sorry. No one will wait for you forever. Not all mistakes can be forgiven. Chapter 14. The sun was shining brightly, a perfect day for pleasant activities. I decided to visit Gu Yi in the detention center. The recent blows had taken their toll on Gu Yi. His eyes were bloodshot and he looked haggard. Through the thick iron bars, Gu Yi glared at me, his eyes filled with hatred. Lu Bai, are you here to gloat? I laughed. He was so naive. Gloat over you? Do you think you're worth it? From the beginning to the end, you've been a pathetic pawn. What you thought was love was just a stepping stone for something else. Seeing his disbelief, I played the video of Shun Qianxi at the airport. The airport was full of my people. If I had given the order, Shen Qianxi would never have boarded that plane. That day was her last chance. A chance to choose a bright future or a bottomless abyss. Gu Yi looked as if he'd been struck in the chest with a hammer. All the color drained from his face, and he stammered. Everything was your plan? You were the one who sent me the information. You deliberately made Shun Qianxi come to me just to drag the Shun Corporation down with her? He understood, but it was too late. There was no way to get the information to Shun Qianxi now. Even if he could, it was already too late. Lu Bai, you're insane. Didn't you always love Shun Qianxi? Why would you scheme against her? The illegal fundraising, that was your trap too, wasn't it? Otherwise, my overseas dealings wouldn't have been discovered. You wanted to ruin me. His agitation pleased me. It suited the weather. I waved my hand, signaling him to calm down. You're just too stupid. The moment Shun Qianxi abandoned our wedding, I stopped loving her. As for not divorcing her, well, the Shun Corporation is quite a prize, isn't it? Some things just prove your stupidity. Gu Yi tried to stand up in a rage, presumably to attack me, but the police officers pushed him back down into his chair. He could only continue cursing. Lu Bai, you're disgusting. You schemed against me just for your own petty desires. I just like Shun Qianxi. You rich people, do you have to use us poor people as your backdrop? Why? Why? I no longer had any desire to stay. I stood up and gave him a serious look before leaving. When you recklessly destroyed my marriage, when you took a watch that didn't belong to you, why didn't you ask yourself if it was yours? You knew you were going to be a backdrop, yet you still offered yourself up. You have no one to blame but yourself? I walked away without looking back, still able to hear Gu Yi yelling behind me. Lu Bai, I'll tell Shun Qianxi everything. Just you wait. She won't let you get away with this. Chapter 15. On the way back, my assistant hesitated to speak. I knew what he wanted to ask. It was nothing more than why I was so certain they would take the bait after I set up such an elaborate scheme. After a moment of thought, I offered him an explanation. People have desires, or rather, people live for their desires. Shun Qianxi lived a carefree life for the first decade or so, and then she started working incredibly hard, all for Gu Yi. Unrequited love, that's the hurdle she couldn't overcome. Now that she has the means, she definitely won't give up. Even if she's disappointed, she'll have to find the answers herself before she lets it go. As for Gu Yi, after all those years abroad, enduring cold stares and ridicule, now that Shun Qianxi has finally found him, he'll definitely put on a show of patiently waiting. That's his only hope. It looks like mutual salvation, but in reality, that kind of youthful desire, if left unconquered, will drag them both into the abyss. After speaking, I closed my eyes. In truth, wasn't I the same? I just severed the softest part of my heart. After the crisis Gu Yi created, I smoothly took over the Shun Corporation. With the support of the Lu Corporation, things were relatively stable. The two corporations had always cooperated closely. After I conceded some of the benefits and gained the approval of the shareholders, the two corporations officially merged. The two leading enterprises in Jiangcheng were finally united, and no one could shake them anymore. After those blows, Shun Qianxi became despondent. She returned to our former marital home, hoping for reconciliation, but found no answers. Because I wouldn't set foot in a place where she was. Even being under the same roof felt dirty to me. Time flies. 6 months later, Gu Yi was released from prison. Unsurprisingly, the two met again. My assistant couldn't stop them. After all, Shun Qianxi was still nominally my wife. They stood in my office. Shun Qianxi's eyes were bloodshot. and she looked at me with despair. Bai, tell me that what Guyi said isn't true. Ignoring Shun Qianxi's trembling form and Guyi's smug expression, I lit a cigarette. Then I looked at her seriously. I don't know what he told you, but as long as he didn't embellish it, it should be true. Disbelief filled her face. Guyi tried to support her, but she shrugged him off. It seemed they couldn't go back to the way they were, just like us. No, Bai, you're lying to me, right? We were childhood sweethearts. We grew up together. You always cared for me, protected me. Even now, you haven't said a harsh word to me. Could all of that be fake too? When you proposed to me, your eyes were full of me. I thought you would be the one to spend my life with. Why are you doing this to me? I didn't answer, only looked at Shen Qianxi coldly. After a long while, I opened a drawer and took out a file. I had prepared the contents for a long time. Shen Qianxi, the answers are inside. Chapter 16. Shen Qianxi tremblingly opened the file, which contained several documents and investigation results. After reading them, all the strength drained from her body. I had my assistant take Guyi out, then made a cup of tea for Shen Qianxi and personally delivered it to her. Shen Qianxi, let's be frank. The European market supplier status that Lu Group couldn't secure for so long was nothing more than a stumbling block you deliberately set up. Your goal, besides wanting me to accept Guyi, was to take over Lu Group, wasn't it? I looked at Shen Qianxi, whose face had drained of all color, without a trace of pity. I know Guyi is your first love. I even asked you before our engagement ceremony. Remember your answer? I was going to let you two be together because I'm not interested in breaking up other people's relationships. You know this very well. It was your father who did all of this back then. It had nothing to do with Lu Group, and even less to do with me, Lu Bai. But what did you do? You took all of your revenge out on Lu Group, even humiliating me at the wedding, making me a laughingstock of the entire upper class. I can honestly say I never hurt you. My heart and eyes were full of you. What were you doing? Swearing to swallow Lu Group when you were 18, right? I gave you a chance. If you didn't love me, why did you choose to marry me? Because your Shen family couldn't survive without the Lu family. You wanted to scheme against me and pave the way for your lover. Now the two families are one. We're married, and you're with your lover. What are you still dissatisfied with? Shen Qianxi was in despair. She collapsed onto the sofa and asked me in a hoarse voice, "So you knew all this, then why did you agree to marry me?" I shrugged. I really didn't want to answer such a stupid question, but this conversation had gone on long enough. It was time to end it. I still gave her the answer. Shen Qianxi, you wanted the family fortunes of both Lu and Shen families, and so did I. Besides, an excellent hunter often appears as prey. After finishing, I had my assistant show her out. Lu Group wouldn't welcome her visits anymore. Over the next few days, Shen Qianxi frantically called me, wanted to talk. After some thought, I met her. The location was the villa where we got married. The layout was still the same as before, everything designed by the two of us over the course of a year. How things have changed. Seeing me enter, Shen Qianxi dropped to her knees with a thud. Bai, I was wrong. I won't fight for those things anymore, okay? I just beg you to live a good life with me in the future. I looked at the still, beautiful woman, but my heart remained unmoved. Shen Qianxi, I've already married you. From now on, please act like Mrs. Lu, and don't embarrass the Lu and Shun families. I won't let you lack for money, and we will treat each other with respect. If you want a child, we could do IVF. After all, you love Guyi, don't you? After I finished speaking, Shen Qianxi collapsed on the ground, tears streaming down her face. By this time, Guyi had been sent abroad by Shen Qianxi. He had just landed when he was involved in a car accident, and he would likely spend the rest of his life bedridden. At that moment, the Lu Bai from 10 years ago, who had been standing outside the private room waiting to pick up Shen Qianxi, turned his head and gave me a relieved smile.